If you can take action without cruelty, without manipulation, without deliberately causing harm, you don't need a fucking cosign. You are allowed to just do the thing. I know that sounds simple. I know it's not simple, but it doesn't make it any less true. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. How are we all doing, guys? I'm your host, Shantel, and welcome back. If you are a loyal listener, and if you are new here, welcome. You have found the Sage Sorority, an online community and weekly podcast for women who want a little more meat on the bones and a lot more depth to their conversations. Every week, we are here unpacking the things that we're all thinking about but don't necessarily say out loud enough, covering topics such as womanhood, identity, self-concept, friendship, dating, you name it. Your only dues are your ears, never your dignity. So welcome. And of course, welcome back to my loyal listeners. I hope everyone is having an amazing week. The weather was absolutely insane yesterday for everyone in London. That sun, rain, hail trifecta that we literally just kept getting all afternoon, absolutely insane. Like crazy. I have had the busiest week of life, and I'm so grateful that today is Thursday and I have nothing in my diary today. I'm absolutely going to chill. And for those of us in London, apparently tube strikes are back. They're back next week. So for those of you that didn't realize, tube strikes are happening, and I would recommend you stay as close to your home base as possible. This is episode 63, and today we are talking about something I genuinely have not been able to stop thinking about since I heard it. I was listening on Audible, and I literally stopped in my tracks on the sidewalk outside, and I was like, ooh, that's good. I need to create an episode about this because I need to bring this to the pod. That's literally how it went, verbatim. And it's so funny because sometimes people will ask me, like, how do you come up with things? And I'm like, sometimes they really do just come to me. I'm literally just living my life and things literally just come to me, like this week's episode. You can tell by the title, Misbehave with Integrity. We're going to talk about what that means, why it's harder for women, of course, than it has to be, what it's costing us, where did I get this idea from, and ultimately what we sacrifice when we don't do it. So let's get into it. Also, before we get into this week's episode, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review because I'm a 5-star chick. It genuinely helps the show more than you guys realize. Spotify and Apple do not have algorithms, so podcasts only grow from word of mouth and sharing. Share this episode with a friend or two or three, and open up your YouTube and subscribe to us on YouTube. Please, 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 and hit that notification bell. Okay, enough of the disclaimers. Let's go. So like I said in the intro, I was listening to an audiobook on Audible recently. You guys know I'm an Audible girly through and through. And the book is called The Late Bloomer by Clarissa Pinkola Estés. So for anyone who doesn't know her, she is a Mexican-American Jungian psychoanalyst, poet, and storyteller. For those of you who are like, that name kind of sounds familiar, she wrote the infamous Women Who Run with the Wolves in 1992, a New York Times bestseller for 145 weeks. This book sold millions. Again, this is 1992, okay? So those are crazy numbers, translated into 37 languages. She was the first Latina on the New York Times bestseller list. Maya Angelou, RIP, said everyone who can read should read it. Alice Walker called it an oracle. So we are not in any mid-tier territory here, okay? I have not read Women Who Run with the Wolves. I do own it. It's quite a dense book, and it's not on Audible. I think there's like a condensed, fragmented version on Audible, but the original version is not on Audible. So I've bought it and I've had it for years. I will get into it at one point in time, but it is truly, if you are into any type of feminine literature, feminine freedom, any of the topics that we talk about here, specifically philosophy, identity, and self-concept, you absolutely need to read Women Who Run with the Wolves. Highly recommend also if you are raising children. It is pivotal reading. I can't stress that enough. Anyways, so The Late Bloomer, the audiobook I was referring to, is volume 4 of her Dangerous Old Woman series, which she's been building across her career as basically a deep exploration of the wise woman archetype. So fitting for the Sage Sorority. I know. And it's an audio series, not a print book, I don't think, which I actually love as a detail because there's something so powerful about hearing her voice delivering this material. And it is her. If you are an Audible girly as well, it's actually her doing the narration, which chef's kiss. It just hits differently. So I'm very, very early into the book. This was literally just the other day that I finally started getting into it, still finding my footing. And she says something that stopped me completely, like I said, on the side of the sidewalk. And she says, behave yourself rarely. That's how you live. Misbehave with integrity. And I was like, ooh, that is so good. That is so good. And I really had to sit with it. I stopped. I put it in my notes. I was like, that is going to be the next pod. I need to journal about this. Like, I love, 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 love reading things that just like hits me like a ton of bricks, like hard. I love that. Because on the surface, it sounds almost playful, maybe even a little rebellious and reckless, but the word integrity is doing the heavy lifting in that sentence. It completely reframes what misbehaving even means, right? Especially when you hear the word misbehaving, you immediately think of children. I don't ever think of adults. I think of children. And this isn't be chaotic. That's not what she's saying. And she's not saying blow your life up either. It's something far more specific, far more considered, and honestly, far more confronting than either of those things. And what I want to explore today is why that phrase lands so differently for women, because I genuinely believe it does and it can if you're open to it. And I think you should be. So first I want to think about the word misbehave. If a woman hears it, would likely clench up in her before she's even processed the word, right? And if you felt that just now, that is the data. So pay attention to that. And I say that because women are not just socialized to behave. We are socialized to believe that behaving well is a moral position. And let me make that even more clear. It is our moral position, especially if you think back to a younger you, a 5-year-old you, an 8-year-old you, a 10-year-old you. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That being agreeable, flexible, endlessly understanding, emotionally available, self-sacrificing, and easy to manage, that is what a good girl looks like, a good woman looks like, a good person looks like. Not just a polite one, but a genuinely good one. And here's where I really want you to hear me. A lot of what we call being good actually has very little to do with ethics. And it has so much to do with being very convenient. Be pleasant. Don't need too much. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't be too loud, too ambitious, too direct, too emotionally unavailable to nonsense. Don't leave too quickly. Don't want too much. And the moment a woman stops doing all of that, that's where the floodgates open, right? And she's called difficult, cold, selfish, changed, bitchy. We've all heard it. Being proper and being ethical are not the same thing. They get treated as identical, one and the same, but they're not. Because propriety, i.e., being proper, is a social contract. Think about things in history that at one point were proper that are no longer considered so. We don't even need to get into the nitty gritty because I'm sure if you're listening, you can think of a few things. Ethics is a personal one. And when those two things come into conflict, which they will, and for women, they do often and regularly, we have been conditioned to always default to propriety every single fucking time without even questioning it. And that's what Estés is basically pushing back against. And that is what the episode is really about. I want to be precise here because I think a lot of conversations about women, quote unquote, breaking rules gets reductive and reduced too quickly to fear of judgment. And I don't think that that is quite accurate enough. What I actually think is happening is this. Most of the time, the decision is often already made, right? At least the decision has been made from our intuition. We know what we want to do. And for most women, we've known for a while. What we do instead is we construct a series of barriers in front of it. Barriers that feel completely real and completely solid until you examine them and then you realize they don't actually exist. They are imaginary constraints built from socialization, not from logic, not from ethics, not from anything that genuinely requires us to wait. And this is really big, I think, if you are a woman considering divorce. What I talk about when I say imaginary constraints is like, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? How are they now going to XYZ? Whether or not those constraints materialize eventually, they really have nothing to do with you. And when I say they're imaginary, I mean like these are not physical things that are actually going to prevent you from doing what you want to do. They are emotional things that you are using consciously or unconsciously to hold you back from making decisions that you know in your gut are the right ones to do. The problem isn't that women are afraid of making the wrong decision, I think most of the time. I think the problem is that we are afraid to be perceived badly once we make the right one. And so instead of acting, we build a case, we loop through it, we ask people around us, we delay and delay and delay, which only gets harder, by the way. We try to get permission from somewhere, anywhere, from the situation itself, from other people involved, from the discomfort eventually becoming unbearable. So I want to be careful here because I think we often reduce this conversation far too quickly to quote unquote a fear of judgment. And honestly, I don't think it's accurate enough. What I actually think is happening is that most of the time, the decision is already made. We know what we want to do. We've known for ages, but what we do instead is construct a series of barriers in front of it. Barriers that feel completely real and really obstructive and completely solid until you actually take the time to examine them. And then you realize that a lot of times they don't really exist. They're imaginary. They're built from socialization and what people think you quote unquote should do, which they might not ever do if they were in your situation, but that's a conversation for another day. Nothing about them actually requires you to wait and stay still. We already know what to do. That is the beauty of being a woman. Our gut instinct is top tier. I talk about this all the time. The decision was probably made a long time ago. And what we're stalling on is the optics. And that is a completely different problem all on its own. So instead of acting, you build this case. We loop and we loop and we loop. We pull the group chat, we delay, we try and extract permission from somewhere, from the situation itself, from other people involved, from the discomfort, eventually becoming unbearable enough to justify moving. We wait for something outside of us to tell us that it is okay. No fairy godmother is coming to bless you with the strength to make the right decision, to call the play. And what Estés is saying with misbehave with integrity is essentially this. The permission isn't coming from outside. Your integrity is the permission. If you can take action without cruelty, without manipulation, without deliberately causing harm, you don't need a fucking cosign. You are allowed to just do the thing. I know that sounds simple. I know it's not simple, but it doesn't make it any less true. The cost of staying in that good girl pattern, the overfunctioning, the managing everyone else's comfort, the pushing down how you feel, the delaying of decisions you've already made is not dramatic. It doesn't usually happen or arrive all at once. It's not loud. It just tends to build. Low grade resentment you can't even trace back to a source is dangerous. It's also palpable. Have you ever been or spent time with a couple that clearly fucking hates themselves? Absolutely awful. It's like everyone can see it in bright, big neon letters except for them. Irritability with people you actually love. Exhaustion that sleep does not fix. If you're tired 24/7 when you're actually getting enough rest and your hormones are okay, you need to look at your relationships and you need to look at your job ASAP because the exhaustion is not physical. It's the constant labor of managing how everyone else feels about you and how bogged down you feel by everyone else. And here's one thing to also sit with, because hopefully this will land for you. There's a category of relationships in your life that's only working because you are doing the heavy lifting. 80% of the emotional labor. The second you stop, that relationship is going to fall apart. Do you know how many marriages I've seen on TikTok where women are like, once I stopped overfunctioning, yeah, my relationship just fell apart. It's like, yeah, it's only going. The wheels are only moving because you are doing more than is sustainable, more than what makes you happy, more than you want to. And you'll have to see if the relationship can stand on its own too. And it's not because you've changed, but the relationship was never fucking balanced to begin with. And this is not just intimate relationships. This can be work. This can be family, especially family. This can be friendship, any relationship you have. And that's not necessarily a comfortable thing to discover, but it is really important, critical information, especially for the type of women that we are, the type of women that we want to be, and the type of lives that we want to lead, and the type of children that we want to raise. And listen, I've been on both sides of this. I've been the overfunctioning friend, and I've been the friend whose access got cut. They both suck. They both hurt. They were both different lessons. both very valuable in their own right. Just a quick note, if this is hitting a little too close for you, if you're sitting on a decision you've already made and you cannot make yourself move, that's literally what I talk about with women in coaching. Single session if you just need a fresh pair of eyes on an old situation, or a 3-session series if we need to go a little bit deeper. The link, as always, is in the show notes. I look forward to chatting. So when you stop over-functioning, people will absolutely notice. And some of them, honestly, might not respond well. You might get called out. You might get called cold. You might get called difficult, selfish. You might get told that you've changed and said in a way that is very clear that it's not a compliment. And here's what I want you to hold on to when those things happen, and they inevitably will. Half the time someone says you've changed, they don't mean your personality. They mean their access to you, what you are willing to put up with from them. Pay attention to what they are actually mourning. Pay attention to what they're actually losing. I also want to be honest about the grief part because we skip past it too quickly. There is real honest grief in becoming less likable in the process of becoming more honest. I'm going to say that again. There is real grief in becoming less likable in the process of becoming more honest. The version of you that kept the peace by keeping herself quiet and small, she was good at her job. Top tier, babe, 10 out of 10. She did what she needed to do to get through. But letting her go absolutely has a cost, and it would be naive and irresponsible of me to not emphasize that and reiterate that, because we truly do ourselves a disservice when we skip over that part and just go raw empowerment. And here's another thing, that the alternative cost, the one you pay by not changing, is also way higher and yields no benefits, or minimal benefits, I would say. Short-term, junk food type benefits. And you pay for it slower, in much smaller increments, much lower ROI, which makes it easier to absorb, easier to ignore, until obviously it isn't. So when Clarissa says with integrity, what does that actually mean? And this is really where the idea, I think, earns its depth. Misbehaving with integrity doesn't mean being cruel. It doesn't mean being impulsive. It doesn't mean weaponizing the word boundaries or performing some hard-ass, cold, bitchy version of yourself for the camera, social media, or the general public. That is not what we're talking about. What it actually means is congruence, alignment between what you believe and how you behave, making clean decisions you can stand behind without lying to yourself about why you made them. Let's also include lying to your therapist or omitting when you're in therapy. Guys, this is a very side note tangent, but we should not be paying therapy money to go and lie to our therapist. And I'm only bringing this up because this is a real thing that I feel like has not been talked about very publicly, but people are going to their therapist and not being fully honest and saying half truths and omitting part of the story. I know everyone likes to feel validated and seen and fangirled, but you can do that with ChatGPT. You should not be going to therapists and lying and omitting and not saying the truth. That is the only way you get better. You need to lay it all out. That is their job. That is what they are there for. They are supportive of you. And I'm telling you, any therapist worth their salt, there's nothing you can throw at them that they haven't heard before. That really doesn't have anything to do with today's episode, but I did want to make that note. Anyways, you have to allow people to be disappointed without making their disappointment your problem, your emergency, your thing to fix. Having self-respect that doesn't require an audience or an explanation. And this is very real, especially in the insane age of social media that we're in. If anything, you're being more ethical, not less. You're just refusing to keep confusing good with convenient. And I think that's really important. And in many cases, that is the most honest thing you will ever do. And if you've been with me for a while and you're a loyal listener, you know that I beat this drum so hard. Look inward for answers before you look outward. This episode is what that actually looks like in real life, and not just vibe coding. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to give you something to think about and that you can actually use. So pay attention to the language you're using around decisions. Specifically notice how often you say I should versus I've decided or I'm going to. because those two phrases are not interchangeable and they often don't come from the same place. I should is still in a permission loop, so to speak. It means you've identified what needs to happen, but you're still waiting for something. The right moment, the right feeling. It could even come from someone else's approval, and someone else I'm using loosely, just some sort of approval to make it official. I should end this. I should say something. I should stop. Should is almost like a holding pattern, but you feel like it's intentional. Does that make sense? Versus I've decided I'm going to is considerably different. Even the saying that I've decided, I rarely hear people speak like that. And that's why sometimes I harp on words, because words are so powerful and we want to make sure that we're using the right ones as best as possible. I've decided is wildly different. It means that the case building, the fact finding is over. You are not lobbying yourself anymore. You are not lobbying for decisions or for inputs. You've looked inward for your answers and not outward, and you know what you're doing and you're moving in accordance with those decisions. It's intentional. It's strong. It's powerful. It's confident. And it's not something that you need to say out loud to anyone. You don't have to announce it or explain it or make it a whole thing. You just notice privately to yourself how many things in your life are sitting in the I should bucket when they're actually I've decided. Or give yourself the permission and the confidence to swap out that phrasing of I should, and maybe you just shouldn't do it at all. That gap between what you know and what you're acting on is really what she's talking about when she says misbehave with integrity. It's also about what you want to do and what you know you should do, and not letting the outside noise steer you in a direction that you have no business going in. Adulthood often requires disappointing so many versions of yourself that survived by being liked. Sometimes it's about going back to the previous versions of you that now you would never tolerate and just having empathy. That girl, that woman, she got you here. She was necessary, but she was built for circumstances that you have outgrown, that you have evolved from. And the most honest, self-respecting thing you can do right now, that your future you wants you to do right now, is stop asking an old version of you to run the show. Stop running those old loops. Stop running those old talk tracks. You are no longer her, and that is not a bad thing. Women who change their lives, and I mean really change their lives, are not the ones who just figured something out that everyone else has missed. They made a decision and they followed through with it, come hell or high water. That is what misbehaving with integrity means. That is what Clarissa Pinkola Estés is trying to share in all of her work. And that is what I'm echoing to you in episode 63 of the Sage Sorority. And that's the pod. Anyways, I hope you guys really liked this episode. If this one resonated, I want you to share it with a friend or two or three. You know how we do. And also, if you really liked this episode and you liked the content, I want to, for new listeners, show you where else you can go for similar episodes of a similar through line and vein. And for loyal listeners, if you want a bit of a refresh, where you can go. So episode 27, The Rules Are Made Up. That episode is the foundation underneath everything we talked about today. It's about discernment, knowing which rules and systems actually serve you versus the ones you've just absorbed without questioning. Start there if you haven't heard it, and or if you really want to refresh on this sort of content. There's also episode 12, Big Energy, No Apology. That is the confidence episode, and specifically about the kind of confidence that doesn't collapse the moment someone pushes back. I think it's worth revisiting with today's conversation in mind. Unfortunately, as women, we are really socialized to take no personally in a way that men are not. And I think that episode 12 is really foundational in kind of deconditioning our minds of that. And then finally, episode 38, the rebrand era. That episode is about what happens when your external life finally catches up to who you've already become internally. Those 3 episodes with today really form a complete picture if you want to go deeper on identity and or self-concept work. And then finally, for those of you that are interested in the book again is called The Late Bloomer. It's volume 4 of the Dangerous Old Woman series. It's an audio series, not in print. So I listen on Audible. I think there are other platforms you can listen to, but that's what I listen to, by Clarissa Pinkola Estés. And obviously, if you want to read her infamous novel, Women Who Run with the Wolves, that'll be linked in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for being here. I love you guys so, so much. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube if you haven't. Obviously, share this with a friend who needs it. And of course, I will talk to you next week, same time, same place. I love you guys. Bye.